Do you get confused deciding which color to put first, which color to put second in a multicolored subject like this hydrangea? You've got pinks, you've got blues, you've got purples, and if that was not enough, we have yellowish green petals to them. Hi, this is Swati and I'm going to show you exactly how I painted these realistic looking hydrangeas in this step-by-step tutorial. Now this is a real-time tutorial, so I'll suggest gather your paints and paint along with me. See you there. So before we start painting, let's take a look at my journal page right here. The flower that we are going to paint, it has two different kinds of petals. It has these greenish yellow petals and then it has these purplish petals. So we need to decide mixes for both. Over here I have jotted down all the colors that are required. So this is how different glazes of color, when introduced one on top of the other, they'll start interacting with each other. These are the colors that we'll be using for these yellowish green petals. This mix can be used to create beautiful shadow color in the center. These are the colors that I majorly will be using for purple petals. There will be no yellow in these petals at all, so we won't be using any yellow here. So this is for the central area. These glazes are for the petals that I see outside. I'll just prep the sheet by adding a layer of clear water all over the petals. So this will prep the sheet and the sheet will be ready to accept the color. I'm taking a number 4 brush, and what I'll do is I'll start incorporating the pink color, that is permanent rose, a very pale wash in obvious pink areas. Now the color isn't flowing a lot, so what I'll do is I'll simply add another layer of water because it has dried. So depending on the weather around, the sheet might dry a little faster than anticipated or slower if the weather is humid. So now the sheet is wet. I'll take a little amount of my pigment, dab excess onto the tissue paper and gently pull the color in. When I'm doing that, I'm actually creating texture of the petal. So I'm simply adding tiny strokes of color going inside, and I'm just lifting my brush like this in the end. So you see how it gives that pattern to the whole petal. So let me zoom it in and you can see what I'm doing. The colors will move around smoothly as far as the sheet is wet. If at all you feel that the colors have stopped moving, then you can again apply a layer of water to it. So I'll just take a tiny amount of this Dioxazine Purple, dab excess on my tissue paper and add it in this area right here. And I'm slowly pulling it inside. See how beautifully it spreads around. Just control the amount of water that you have in your brush. You don't want a lot, or else the color might bleed into the areas that we don't want it to be running in. So let me zoom out and you can see the kind of result that we have achieved. So I'll repeat in the other areas as well. I'm simply dropping in color wherever it's required. Since the sheet is still wet, I can simply dab my brush and drop in color. The water will help it spread around. So I'm mostly working wet and wet right now. I'm introducing color while the sheet is still wet, and this will also help me create beautiful texture on the petals, because the petals are not that smooth. If you study a hydrangea petal, it's a very rough one. Don't worry about any mistakes at this stage. We have a lot more layers to come in. We are not using any yellow in these petals at all, or else our subject will get dull, because yellow is the complementary color of purple, and when mixed together it results in a very dull color. I'm not even mixing purple and permanent rose at this stage. I'm simply introducing color wherever it's dominating. For example, if purple is dominating in a section, I'm just introducing purple in that section. I'm not mixing these two colors on paper at all. I'll be doing that in different glazes once the previous layer dries completely. For example, this area right here is quite dry now, and I know that I need more purple. So I'll simply add a glaze of purple like this. So the layer underneath, it will definitely show. And if you feel that you end up getting a very hard line, simply use a clean brush and smoothen out the edge like this. So you won't get any hard lines. So let me zoom it in and you can see what I mean. You see right here, I have no hard line. I have simply cleaned it. So this is where we are, and we'll be repeating another glaze once it dries completely. Alright, so our first layer is completely dry, so there's no water over it. So for the second layer, I'll wet the petal area once again. And I'm trying not to disturb my first layer. So I'm moving my brush very gently over it. I don't want to disturb the petal surface at all. Alright, so what's the approach here? I'll start with this petal right here. I see a lot of purple in this area. I see a lot of purple in this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start depositing this Dioxazine Purple with the help of my fine brush and start creating textures. I'm using number 1 brush for this, and I'll start adding details with this brush, dabbing excess on the paper. Now sheet is almost dry. Let me see how it plays around. I'm simply dabbing my brush tip, and it helps to spread the color around. Now I don't want it to go any further than that. So I have to be really careful, and I have to keep an eye on where the color is moving. If required, I can lift some excess color with the help of thirsty brush. I'm leaving some gap in between so that it creates that beautiful highlight. So I've started strengthening the color here in my second layer. I don't want to use too much color yet because I might make some mistakes. We'll be coming back at least 3 times after this layer, and we can make adjustments accordingly. But for now, I'm gradually strengthening the color, leaving highlights in between. Now these are not very strong highlights. I do see some color. We'll see if we need to tone them down a bit more in the end when we put our final glaze on, but for now I'm just adding some details. You see how beautifully it spreads around. Although the sheet has started drying a bit, but because of the humid weather around, it's taking a bit longer to dry completely. And I'm taking advantage of the weather actually. And I have much more room to play around while the sheet is still wet. It's been raining heavily here, and we are enjoying monsoons in India. So I'll let it sit at that. Over here I see some blue tint. I'll take this color. Now ultramarine blue color is quite granulating in nature. It's perfectly fine for a subject like this where the petals are not that smooth. So we can use this color. But if you are aiming for a petal that is very smooth and shiny, then it's better to stay away from this granulating color. So granulating means that it looks as if some granules have been deposited on the surface of the sheet. So it creates that rough texture. I'll also add a tiny bit over here. So we have three colors in the petal now. We have blue, we have pink and purple. I'm enjoying so much rendering this petal. The play of color is beautiful. This was the reason I actually opted for this subject. I really liked the petals. So I have pink already in my first wash, so I do see purple, so I'll simply apply the purple shade on top of the pink. Since we did that glazing exercise, we know what the result we'll get. So when we glaze purple over pink, I know this is the kind of result that I'll get. So that's what I'm aiming here. I can even start cleaning up the edges of the petals at this stage. It will keep me focused to work inside or outside those lines rather than going over. So I'm using a lot less color. I'm still judging where the colors will go because the first layer was quite loose. It was wet in wet, it was loose, and I didn't have that much control where the pigments were going, but now I can clearly see where the veins are and I can apply color more precisely with my fine brush. So I've started giving it some definition. So here I do see a mix of pink and purple in this section. So I'm glazing a purple color over the pink underneath. Since my previous layer is completely dry, I won't lose that pink underneath. Otherwise I might lift it off the sheet. So just a fun fact, hydrangeas are my favorite flowers. I'm always in awe of the shades they come in. Like even if you see flowers on the same plant, you'll see so many subtle differences in the petal colors. And the colors, they vary according to the pH level of the soil. So some may be pink, some may be purple, and initially the petals are quite yellowish green in nature, but then as they age, as they get old, they acquire that purple color. So this is the reason we see the center of the flower in yellowish green color, and those are the new petals that are coming from inside, and the outer petals that are older ones, they are purple in color or pink in color. They also come in blue color. So this is my second time painting hydrangeas. Actually I have painted the blue variety earlier. I'll put an image of that somewhere so that you can see. So the color palette is completely different from what I'm painting now, so that got me excited. While it's still wet, I know that there's some pink here, so I'll simply dab it while let them mix in together. So this will give it a more natural look. When we paint it wet and wet, it's a more natural look. I'm just dabbing the excess color that I already have in my brush and creating a texture over here. Let's move on to this petal. So this has dried completely. Let me add some more water. So we want it to go semi-dry actually. We don't want to add in color while it's this wet. Otherwise we won't have that much control on our colors. We won't get these fine lines that we are looking for. So I'll just wait and let it sit. So you can always tilt your head and check at the sheen. It's semi-dry and I can start adding the purple in the dark areas. I'm still using a number 1 brush and I'm still dabbing in excess color and water before applying it on the sheet. That way you're always safe. Now there are some highlights in this area, so I've left some gap in between to suggest that texture. So when the light falls on the petal, we get to see the texture of the leaves because of the highlight. So that's what we are suggesting here. I can strengthen the purple a bit more while it's still wet. I do see a lot of purple here. So you simply judge that how much I can achieve while it's still wet. What all can I add in? So I'll leave it at that. Moving on to this petal now. Start depositing color in the area that is quite saturated. That way I'm playing safe. I don't want to deposit a lot of color in a light area. So I'm safe over there, and now I watered it down. And let's see how the result is. Look how beautifully it spreads around. I like that. So we can go till here. So with the help of this fine brush, I can add fine details like these veins that I see, suggestion of veins. Here's a strong one. So I can take my brush and start drawing those veins in. So for this, definitely opt for a fine brush like a number 1 or 0. You can even use a number 2 brush if you got a good tip. So it all depends on the quality of the brush. You won't believe, once I was working with this synthetic brush, which was a number 12, and I could actually complete the whole painting using that brush because it has that beautiful tip to it. So it depends on the quality of the brush. The best part is you don't need to keep loading your brush with color. If you have a bigger brush, it holds much more than a smaller brush like this. So this area right here, it has quite a lot of pink. So my purples are done. I'm moving into the pink area and I see the strong texture over here. So I'm depositing some good amount of color, creating that texture. And that's it. I'm going to clean my brush and just move over it to soften it a bit. And a pale wash of pink will help soften it. So I'm closely observing the reference image so not to make any mistakes. Over here I do see some purple. So again I'll go back. It's quite pale, so I have to be really careful not to deposit a lot. I can add some more color over here to suggest that shadow, but apart from that it's quite pale because this is the highlight area. We don't want to lose all the white of the paper in this section. That's the key for it to look 3D. So I'm just adding some pale purple and pink. So I do see some veins. So I'm just suggesting them in pink. They look like connecting nerves, you know. So we have the main ones, then we have really tiny connecting ones. So I can just go around and suggest some with my fine brush. Over here, it has a stronger pigment where it's bending. I'm using a very pale pigment in this section. Alright, so our second layer is dry now and we'll move on to our third layer. So we'll keep building details now on, keeping the amount of water way less than before. I'm going to add the pigment in the darkest areas now. So wherever I see that the tone of the flower or the color is way dark than the surrounding color, I'll start adding the color there. I do see that because this petal is raised, I see there's a lot of darkness right at the edge. So when I add this pigment, it lifts the petal up. So that's what I'll be doing. I'm simply adding color in the dark areas. As soon as I start cleaning up the edges, I get more definition in my flower and I enjoy painting this way. So I enjoy painting much more when I can see where I'm going. This definitely gives us reassurance that we are heading in the right direction. Now over here I see a lot of pink. So let me just mix these two colors together for a change. Oh, I love this shade. Now these outlines will be more apparent in some areas and less apparent in others. So pay a close attention to the reference image. So layer 3 onwards, I'm actually working wet on dry. So there's no water on the sheet. I'm just adding pigment on dry surface to strengthen the saturation. In some areas, I'm almost doing dry brush. As you can see here, I don't have a lot of pigment, neither do I have a lot of water. I'm simply laying down the leftover color from my brush like this, and it's almost in dry brush technique. You see there's no water at all. This will add in some texture. I did make some mistake here, so I'll just widen this petal right here. So mistakes do happen. I accidentally dropped the brush in this area and hit it with Dioxazine Purple, which is quite a staining color. So even after trying to lift it with a hard brush, I was not able to get it off. So sometimes you just cannot rectify the mistakes. So I'm just changing the shape here. It's very important to re-establish the outlines at this stage, or else we might get confused where one petal starts and where it ends. I'm taking some more pigment, and this time I'm mixing these two colors. A beautiful mauve color, and I need it in these areas. So in layer 3, as I said, I am working on dark areas. So this is where the dark tones are. Now I do want to make some raindrops. I'm just taking this dark shade and creating small circles. If you look closely, you will see there are very tiny drops of water all over. So when I took this photograph, it was raining heavily. I wanted to capture the flowers anyhow, so I took one umbrella. I asked my husband to wait, and I quickly grabbed my umbrella, my camera, and went all over the garden and the resort that we were staying, and I captured some beautiful flower images. You gotta do what you gotta do, girl. I'm glad I did it. I got such beautiful shots. And just adding these beads of water here and there. Mostly in the places I see it in the picture. But that's fine. It's not hard and fast that you have to add it in the same area. We can balance it out. This is the reason that some of the highlights are quite strong. It's the water that is reflecting off the surface of the flower. I do see a strong one there over here. It's quite big. Let me take this purple and let's add it in these areas right. A wiser option to start with the veins that are quite obvious when you look at the petal. Alright, so this is how it looks after layer number 3. So I have added in all the details in here. They're almost dry now. And what are we going to do now? So this is a good time to check the tonal value of the flower. So the details are in, and judging the tonal value, we can start adding some light washes over the details. If I look at the tonal value, I know that there's a lot of color in this area right here, so it needs a dark wash. This area right here also needs some wash, and this area right here. So these three areas are way darker than the rest, so, and this area as well. So I'll just grab number 2 brush, and without disturbing the details underneath, I'll try to go around the drops of water that I have drawn. That's important. So this is the color that I'm looking for. So what I'll do is, I have these drops of water. So I'll go around them, and I'm using a very light hand here so that the underneath details are not lost, and I'm keeping an eye as to if there are any highlight areas that I need to protect at this stage. This is quite dark. So the moment I start adding those layers, I see that the petal has started taking some shape. Do you see how it's folding over? So when I'm judging the tonal value, I'm also judging the pigment color. So not all the areas are violetish or purplish, some are pinkish. So I'll add a little bit of pink in this area. So that was way too much, so let me just spread it around. Next is this area, that's also purplish, so I'll have to protect the water droplets. purple is right up till this point. Let me dab in some color while it's still wet, and it will spread around. Next we have pink in that area, so I have to keep switching back and forth to match the colors. Coming on to blue, we do have blues in some areas, quite apparent. For example, in here, let me spread it around. Very clearly, we have blue in this area. A little bit over here, gently dropping it in. We'll leave it at that for now. Let's move on to the yellow center and the yellow petals. So I'll be showing you how to do this section right here. Alright, so my previous layer is dry completely. So I'll just switch to the yellow green pigments. One thing to remember is these colors, they should dry completely before you start introducing these new shades of colors. Otherwise what will happen is that these colors will start bleeding in the other petals and you'll get muddy colors. This little exercise that we did, we know that if green and purple, they start interacting with each other, this is what it will result in, and this is a very dull color. This is not that we want in our composition to happen. So we need to keep these areas quite separate from each other. And starting right in the center now. So I've added a glaze of clear water. Next, I'm going to add some lemon yellow to it. So let me prep the pigments. Disregard all these colors right here, we don't need them. They're just on my palette from some other tutorial. This is way too wet for it, so I'll have to wait for it to semi-dry. So I'm just tilting my head and checking the color right there. In the meanwhile, what I can do is I can prep these petals. Now one thing to remember is when you are switching pigments, you need to switch your water as well. You see this has got a pink tint to it. So I'm switching this jar with a clean jar of water. So this is semi-dry. Let's grab some lemon yellow. I'm going to keep it quite light this stage. It's not very saturated yellow. If you look at the centers, they're not as vibrant as these petals. So these centers, they open and they bloom into these yellow petals, right? So that's why both of them have the same color, but the colors are quite saturated on the petals that are here. In this area, we have purple. You'll have some petals where both the colors are visible at the same time. And we don't want them to mix in this petal. So I'm just cleaning up the edges and keeping an eye where the water is, so they don't bleed into each other. If they bleed into each other, it will form a gray. So yellow and purple, they are complementary colors. Sitting right next to each other, they look quite vibrant, but when they mix into each other, it forms a gray. So we have to be very careful when we are adding both the colors on the petal. If at all you feel that the sheet is very wet and you might have a chance of them mixing into each other, just wait for the yellow to dry completely and then come over again with your purple. Now in this center, I see some blue and purple mixed. So that's the shadow color that I see over there. It has dried, so I can start adding the details. Moving back to this, so let me prepare the green now. It's not very green, so I'll rather mix it in with lemon yellow itself. So This is the kind of color that we have. It's quite a neon color. So I'm adding that over here. Now we do need a shadow color right in the middle, right? And that is way too dull. So what we can do is we can mix in a little amount of purple to create that shadow color. What say? Let's try that. So I'm taking some purple and mixing it with these two. And that's a very nice color for the shadow. Let me try doing that in this area. Yeah. You see, such a beautiful shadow color. It instantly adds that depth that we are looking for. Now we'll have to wait in this area. Now I see this requires a little more yellowish green, so let me add that in a few places to suggest that it's not white. That looks good to me. This area is dry. I can again go back with some purple, softening the edges. That looks good. So let it dry completely and then we'll go back in the next layer with our shadow color and add some veins and texture to it. Alright, so the yellow layer has dried completely. Let me go ahead and make some more of that shadow color. I added a little more of that purple. Now since the yellow has dried, it won't run inside. I can create a very clean outline. Let me try and make those fine veins. This is a number 1 brush, but it has got a nice tip to it. I have some greenish yellow, strong greenish yellow on the left. At the same time, I can judge if I need more green here, which I do. So alternating colors will also help it get that form. So we'll let it dry and then we'll add some details over here. So let this area dry. Yellow has dried and let me add some details. So again I'm mixing some shadow color for the veins. I'm trying to keep my brush vertical to create a very fine line. Now I do feel that I lost some highlights in here. So let me try and clean them up. I'll see what I can do. So let me grab a synthetic brush for that. That's a little harsher than my sable brushes. Let's see. So I have a tissue paper handy. This is the area I want the highlights back. Although the pigment is quite staining, but I'll see what I can do. It helped a bit, not much though, because the color itself is very staining in nature. Once it's up, it's up. We do have some color. That's fine. I'll just let it sit there and maybe in the end I can judge the tonal values once again. Alright, so that's done. That's the yellow petal. So I'll go around and do the rest of the petals. Let me zoom out and you can see where we are in the composition. So I still have these many petals to finish. So I'll just fast forward and do all the steps that I did and we'll see how it looks. In the end, I'll do some tonal adjustments, but for now I'll move on to other petals. So just enjoy. I hope you liked this tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel if you did. Happy painting!